She was never running with anybody. No connect, no crew, no protection. Just a badge, a plan, and a list of names she was waiting to burn through. And now, years after Power ended, the man behind the entire Power universe just confirmed something fans have been begging for since Raising Kanan went off the air. Jukebox is coming back. Sasha Penn didn't just hint at it. He laid out exactly how it could happen, and the pieces he mentioned line up with things Ghost and Tommy already know, things they've been hiding since the very first episode of Power. This is bigger than a cameo. This could change everything we thought we understood about how Ghost and Tommy became who they became. For months now, ever since Raising Kanan wrapped up its final season, fans have been stuck on one question. What happens to Jukebox? Does she disappear completely, or does she find her way into Power Origins? It's not a small question either, because if you go back and watch the early episodes of Power carefully, there is no doubt Ghost and Tommy already know exactly who Juke is. Remember the scene where Kanan mentions who is holding Tariq? Watch Ghost's face in that moment. That is not the reaction of someone hearing a stranger's name for the first time. Then there's the moment Ghost and Juke come face to face later on. And Tommy doesn't hesitate before calling her a crazy female, using language that makes it clear this isn't the first time he's heard about her. These aren't throwaway lines. These are breadcrumbs Courtney Kemp planted years ago. And now it's up to Sasha Penn to decide how to pick them back up. The confusion around all of this really started when Hailey Kilgore came out on social media and said she wouldn't be part of Power Origins. That single statement sent fans into a spiral. If Juke isn't in Origins, how do Ghost and Tommy ever cross paths with her? How does any of it make sense? But just recently, Sasha Penn sat down for an interview with Kimmy over on Chronicles of Power. And what he said in that conversation has completely shifted the conversation. It's a great watch if you haven't seen it yet, because Kimmy always knows exactly which questions to ask Sasha Penn to get him talking. She's clearly built a relationship with him over the seasons, and it shows in how much detail he's willing to share with her during that interview. Sasha Penn made it very clear that he knows Ghost and Tommy are aware of who Juke is, and that Juke also knows exactly who Ghost and Tommy are. He didn't dodge the question. He leaned into it. And what he said next is the reason this whole theory is picking up steam again. He explained that Power Origins has only completed one season so far, and there could be multiple seasons ahead. He made the point that just because a character doesn't show up in season 1, that doesn't mean they're written out of the story completely. He brought up Snaps and Pop as an example, to characters who didn't appear until season 3 of Raising Kanan, yet ended up becoming some of the most important characters in the entire show. His point was simple. There is a lot of time between when Raising Kanan ends and when Power actually begins, and a lot can happen in that gap. That timeline detail matters more than people realize. Raising Kanan just wrapped up in 1993. Power doesn't pick up until years later. That leaves a massive window where anything could happen, including Juke building the reputation that eventually makes Ghost and Tommy fear her name. Sasha Penn also confirmed that filming on Power Origins Season 1 has already wrapped, and he strongly hinted that more seasons are coming. Fans will remember 50 Cent once teasing that the Power Origins story could stretch across 5 years of content. If that's the actual plan, then there's more than enough room for Sasha Penn to bring Jukebox back in a way that finally makes sense. Maybe not in Season 1, but somewhere down the line once the foundation of the story is set. And that's exactly where things start to get interesting. Because once you accept that Juke is coming back at some point, the real question becomes how. What does her return actually look like? What does it mean for Kanan? What does it mean for Ghost? That's what we're going to break down next, because Sasha Penn didn't just tease a return. He hinted at a story with real weight behind it. Now let's actually talk about who Jukebox is. Because if you're going to understand why her return matters so much, you have to understand where she came from and what kind of person she really is. When we were first introduced to Juke back in Power, she wasn't running product like everyone else in that world. She didn't have a connect. She wasn't answering to anybody. She was a cop working out of DC, and she used that badge to her advantage in the most dangerous way possible. She used her position in law enforcement to plan and pull off robberies, hitting licks with a level of precision that most street hustlers could never manage. Because she had access and information that regular criminals simply didn't have. That's what made her terrifying from the very beginning. She wasn't reckless. She was calculated. She used the very system that was supposed to stop crime to commit it instead, and she was smart enough to make sure nobody saw it coming. There's a small detail fans might remember where she used to boost clothes just to pay for studio time, which tells you everything about who she was as a person. She had ambition outside of the streets, dreams that didn't fit into the box people tried to put her in. But she was also willing to do whatever it took to fund those dreams. Even if that meant crossing lines most people wouldn't cross. This is the kind of energy Sasha Penn could bring into Power Origins if he decides to write in a small arc for her. Imagine Juke resurfacing in New York during this earlier timeline. Not connected to Kanan's organization, not looking for permission from anybody. Just moving through the city hitting robberies and causing problems for people who don't even know she exists yet. Courtney Kemp actually spoke about this exact idea years ago. She said she wished she had more time with Nicole Ari Parker's portrayal of Juke in Power, because she originally planned on bringing Juke back to New York to create absolute chaos for Tommy and Ghost. That storyline never got the chance to fully play out in the original show. But Power Origins gives Sasha Penn a second chance to explore that exact idea. Except now he can build it from the ground up instead of trying to squeeze it into an already established storyline. Think about how much heat Tommy and Ghost were already dealing with during that era. They had Jason Missick breathing down their necks. They had the Jimenez cartel creating problems. They had Dre working every angle against them. Now add Juke into that mix. Someone completely unpredictable. Someone with nothing to lose. Someone who doesn't operate by the same rules everyone else in the street follows. That's a nightmare scenario for Ghost and Tommy. And it's exactly the kind of chaos that makes for incredible television. There's also an emotional layer here that people tend to forget about. Juke was the one originally planned to kill Rhino. That storyline got scrapped. But the intention behind it says a lot about how dangerous Courtney Kemp always envisioned this character being. If Sasha Penn wanted to, he could easily bring back a piece of that idea. Maybe not with Rhina specifically, since that's already been told a different way, but with the same level of unpredictable violence that made people fear Juke in the first place. And if that happened, you can imagine how Tasha would react. Tasha never got the chance to confront the person responsible for what happened to her daughter. And if there was ever a moment for Sasha Penn to give the audience that kind of emotional payoff, weaving Juke into that pain in some form during Power Origins could be exactly the direction he takes. But let's bring this back to the emotional core of Juke's story, because that's really where her return would hit the hardest. By the end of Raising Kanan, Juke has lost everything that mattered to her. Marvin is dead. Her relationship with Aisha is completely broken, arguably beyond repair. And that final moment between her and Kanan, where she openly admits that killing Marvin is going to keep her warm for a long time, tells you exactly where her head is at. She has nothing left to lose. That kind of person doesn't stay in one place. That kind of person doesn't build roots. I genuinely believe Juke becomes someone who drifts after this. She leaves New York behind, not because she's scared, but because there's nothing left there for her anymore. Marvin's death took something from her that I don't think she ever gets back. I don't think she goes looking for Aisha either. That relationship feels completely dead at this point, and honestly, I don't think Juke has the capacity to love anything or anyone the same way again after everything she's been through. So picture her moving from city to city, place to place, never settling, always looking over her shoulder, always calculating her next move. That's the Juke we know is going to eventually end up back in DC working as a cop, which means somewhere between the end of Raising Kanan and the start of Power, she reinvents herself completely. She goes from being a hardened street figure in New York to a police officer running her own operation on the side. That transformation alone is a story worth telling, and it's the kind of gap Sasha Penn has direct access to fill in Power Origins if he chooses to. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. We know in Power, Juke's surname was Gunna, not Thomas, not anything connected to her New York identity. That name change has never been explained, but if you think about it, it makes complete sense given everything she's been through. Kanan himself uses the surname Stark instead of Thomas, so we already know that changing your name to separate yourself from your past isn't out of place in this universe. I think Juke changes her surname the moment she leaves New York behind. She doesn't want to be tied to the Thomas family, to Kanan, to Marvin's death, to any of it. She wants a clean break from everything that happened in Queens back in 1993. Sasha Penn now has the perfect opportunity to actually explain this on screen instead of leaving it as a background detail fans have to piece together themselves. There's another piece of this puzzle that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention, and that's the fact that Juke was the one who killed Snaps and Pop. Nobody in the show ever figures this out. Breeze couldn't connect the dots, and even Kanan admitted that whoever pulled off that move had to be someone serious, someone capable. I think deep down Kanan has an idea it was Juke, even if it's never confirmed. He knows she wanted revenge for what happened to Marvin. He knows Aisha came to him in a panic, warning him that Juke was about to do something reckless. All the pieces are there for Kanan to put it together, even if the show never says it directly. Taking down to major players like Snaps and Pop is not a small move. That's the kind of thing that builds a reputation in the streets. The kind of reputation that eventually makes its way to people like Tommy. People who hear stories about a woman capable of wiping out established players without leaving a single trace. Behind this is exactly the kind of history Sasha Penn could weave into Power Origins to explain why Tommy calls her a crazy female the moment he sees her again years later in Power. That's not just an insult thrown out randomly. That's Tommy recognizing a name, a reputation, a legend built from stories he heard growing up in the streets, stories about a woman nobody wanted to cross. Same with Ghost. When Kanan reveals who's holding Tariq, the fear on Ghost's face isn't just about the danger Tariq is in. It's about who Juke actually is. Someone Ghost has clearly heard about before. Someone whose name alone is enough to make him nervous. Juke was always someone who paid attention to everything happening around her, even when people assumed she wasn't paying attention at all. She said it herself back in Season 4, Episode 10, in a conversation with Rock. Just because people don't notice her doesn't mean she isn't noticing them. That single line tells you everything about how she operates. She's always watching, always calculating, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. So when you put all of this together, the robberies, the reputation, the name change, the disappearance from New York, the eventual return years later, you start to see exactly why Sasha Penn's comments matter so much. He's not just teasing a random cameo. He's hinting at a character with layers, a backstory worth exploring, and a return that could shake up the entire foundation of Power Origins. And that brings us to the part of this theory that I think is the most exciting. The possibility of Juke actually coming face to face with Kanan again, years after everything that happened between them. And what that kind of reunion could mean for the entire direction of the show. Let's talk about what a reunion between Juke and Kanan could actually look like. Because if Sasha Penn does decide to bring this storyline into Power Origins, this is where it gets really personal. We already know the history between these two. We watched it play out right in front of us at the end of Raising Kanan. Kanan kills Marvin to save Tariq's life. And in that same breath, Juke tells Kanan that knowing what she did to him is going to keep her warm for a long time. That's not just a threat. That's a promise. That's a woman telling you directly that she is not done, that whatever happens next between them is only a matter of time. And then there's that other line she throws at him, the one about Marvin never loving him anyway, the one about Marvin begging her to kill Kanan instead of her at the very end. That's cruelty on a level most characters in this show don't reach. That's someone who wants Kanan to carry that pain for the rest of his life. And I don't think Sasha Penn is going to let a moment like that just disappear into the background. I think that tension is exactly what gets picked back up in Power Origins. Whether that's in Season 2, Season 3, or wherever Sasha Penn decides the timing works best. Now here's where I want you to really think about the storytelling potential here. Because Courtney Kemp originally had a backstory in mind for how Kanan got that scar. It was never actually said on screen in Power, not in dialogue, not in a flashback, nothing. It was simply something she had in mind behind the scenes, an idea, maybe something written down, maybe something she talked about in a writer's room, but never got the chance to bring to life. That leaves the door completely open for Sasha Penn. He has full freedom here. He could take Kanan's scar in a completely different direction if he wants to. Maybe having him get it in prison instead, which would honestly fit the timeline in a very different but still compelling way. Or if he wants to honor what Courtney Kemp originally envisioned, he could build toward exactly that moment. A physical confrontation between Kanan and Juke years after Marvin's death, where all of that unresolved anger and betrayal finally boils over into something violent. Picture it. Juke comes back into New York after years away. Maybe she's been drifting from city to city like we talked about. Maybe she's already becoming the version of herself who eventually becomes a cop in DC. But there's a period before that where she's still connected to the streets, still angry.